Welcome to Financial with Ahau. It's such a joy to be together with you again as we continue to converse in our Making More series. And today we build up the conversation on education planning. We introduced it with an overview, just getting to think through what does it mean, how does it span out, and how are we going to think about it as we put it as one of the things that we're doing in our Making More journey. Allow me to have us think through what does an education mean? It's a good place to start from. Why has education currently been listed as a basic need? Growing up, it was always food, shelter, clothing. But now education is listed as a primary need. And that is because education is coming to a place of knowledge, and then knowledge is potential to apply information, which can then make our lives better. And when we look at history, the more education community, society received, the better outcomes they had. Their health improved, their economy improved, their faith improved, their interactions improved. The overall outcomes of that community became better because they had a heightened place of knowing what to do and knowing how to apply it. And that becomes key. I will digress and speak about the African continent. One of the things that has been placed in this SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, has been getting every child to access an education. Getting every girl child to access an education, because we also know there has been a strong bias towards educating the boy child, which has really been pushed to ensure that every child has access to education. We have seen things being put in place by governments and by international NGOs, like the free primary education, making sure all children transition into the next thing after primary, whether it is to secondary, whether it is to skills program, making sure there's a transition from high school into tertiary institutions, whether it's the trainings, whether it's the colleges, the polytechnics, the universities, apprenticeships. There has been a very strong push to ensure that no child, no young person is left behind in the place of getting a proper education. So this creates a very good foundation for us to realize that education is not something that we are going to win. Education is something that we are going to take time. We are going to put it as part of our Making More series. I've had very many parents speak and say that for them, the greatest thing that they could ever do for their children is an education that will work for them. And we see them making sacrifices, we see them making certain decisions. Just recently, I was being told within our system in Kenya, we do for a long time a national exam that transitions children into high school. And that exam has been very key. We currently have a new education system that's trying to ease that, but the old education system is still not relevant. And you find parents even go to the extent of ensuring their children are registered in a school where there will be a favorable outcome for their results. How they tell it, maybe they look at the history of the school and things like that, but you see that there is a lot that is put into thought to ensure that children are doing well. And that makes it very clear that education is actually a wealth that we pass on to our children. The question then becomes, what things are we going to put in place? What are we thinking through as we plan for education? And I remember I was listening to a certain minister, and he shared that once they had a meeting as a family, and they began to speak through what every child aspired to do. Him and his wife had understood the different children's strengths, and they really wanted to have a conversation about the journey that the children will take. And one of the things that came out of this conversation as a family was certain things needed to change in terms of how the children went to school, in terms of how they were engaged. So for this family, it was very defined that their education planning was putting into consideration the purpose of their children. It was putting into consideration the interest of their children. And it was putting into consideration their capacity. So these three things become very, very important. What's the purpose? Every child is a gift from God, so we have to live out and scheme. What's the purpose of this child? Then we look at the interest. Every child is totally unique with an interest, with a skill set that is peculiar to them. And then we look at capacity. We also refine that sometimes we set our education goals based on the geometries. So my neighbor's children go to this school. Ideally, if we live in the same neighborhood, then we just begin to influence each other. But we have to always have the grounding factor of what is our own capacity as a family, what is my own capacity as a parent. And recently, I remember speaking with a parent, and one of the things that her child is very enthusiastic about, actually, two parents, is football. And she was just so defined that part of planning for this child's education is ensuring that they have access or in a facility where they can access football as a skill set that you can build up. And for them, this means an extra planning in terms of their budget, because then the kits they need to do, they may be the travel they need to do, they may be the camps they need to go for, and things like that. So you see that coming into play as a parent is thinking through and planning what education direction their child is going to take. And sometimes it just looks like here's a child, they go to school and we see how that goes. One or two children that could work. But for the majority of our children, there's a certain level of intentionality that has to go into it. So the question we could ask ourselves further is, what facilities are available to us to ensure we're doing this? And for a long time growing up, I remember the only thing I used to see was the big banks advertising children's bank accounts. And then they would tell the parents that once you reach a certain minimum, then you begin to earn interest and things like that. So for a long time, it was just a traditional, let's save in the bank and let's unlock from there. And then we've seen in the recent past a greater advancement in financial tools. So we've seen places where my parents can take education covers. And this has also been brought about where parents, God forbid, they pass away when the child is very young, they become financially incapacitated for whatever reason, and they would like the children to stay at the same level of education, or a parent may perceive a certain level of investment that would be needed when a child may be transitioning from kindergarten to primary, from primary to high school, from high school to university, and they want to make sure they are pushing themselves for those big investments. So you're finding that now there are tools in that direction. Many such facilities in insurance are even allowing for parents to put into place plans before their children are being placed. They would be insuring themselves, but the ideal objective is for it to support them to cover the education of their children. And then you also see the community engagement, where especially women absolutely love this, where we are part of the groups of the table banking, the shared goals groups, where we know that we're putting money aside maybe once or twice a year. I receive a certain amount and then I'm going to put it towards my children's education. Then we also have the growth of saving cooperatives, which offer their facilities at a better rate, which also are offering certain investment tools towards the education of our children. I remember coming across such a beautiful family's plan, and I could see that this father had taken out the circle for himself and for each of his children, meaning he's contributing, but this is going towards building this children's future. So at least now, the things that are available to us towards building our children's future in their education becomes key. And then there's also just thinking through, based on who this child is, would they even receive a scholarship? Would they receive certain exposures that will enable them to even scale to the next height? And what do we do and how do we put them out there to ensure that they are aligned to this? I remember in high school, we would do drama festivals very actively in school. And you had certain girls who were just skilled, like they would act and you'd miss them and you're like, are you the same person? And one such year, our school won. And then our school won. The three top actors from my school got scholarships into schools where they could continue to build their talent. And I kid you not, at least two I know continue to actively use the talent they have grown and they're scaling heights. So this means there's so much intentionality, even from the parent, practicing for these dramas, it takes time. Other children at home, your child is away to practice their way for these festivals. So again, it's asking yourself the questions. How is this building up who my child is, their purpose, their interest in our capacity? I really want us to stay there. As always, grab your notebook, grab your pen, set out these goals. And as we said before, you don't need to have either a child of your own or be a guardian even directly to say that's going to be a decision for you. It just needs to be something that's part of your future. Because you will have your children, you have people with children around you, and you can be part of their journey. Thank you so much for listening. It's a joy, it's a how, and we look forward to conversing with you